Hi guys, today we're going to be talking about another cutting edge topic. It has to do with music and performance. So let's do it and let's roll that wonderful intro. Hey, welcome back. Bruce here once again for Blackboard Rules. Today we're going to be talking in this video about doing gigs for exposure. Now, what is a gig for exposure? Well, that basically means that you're going to be playing for free in lieu of being put in front of an audience or a crowd that you might not otherwise have been able to have exposure to. Now, as in some of my previous videos, we're going to talk about this today, and we're going to discuss some of the pros and cons of this. So firstly, let's talk about the pros. Number one, you're going to be playing in front of a live audience, which is usually not ever a bad idea, and it'll help you to cement the material that you already know for future performances. Number two, by doing gigs like this and being exposed to a new crowd and new people, you may be able to garner new gigs in the future that actually do pay. Another aspect of doing a gig for exposure is that you get to grow your following or your audience. The more people that see you, the more people that know about you, and so that's potential income for you in the future. Let's talk about some of the cons now. And I think the number one con is that you are not going to be paid for your work. Number two, the likelihood of you getting a gig in the future that pays from this exposure is, in my experience, probably slim to none. Number three, it costs you in time and money and effort. If you take into account rehearsals, setting up your gear, loading it into the car or truck, driving it to this gig, setting it up, playing, tearing it down, that's a lot of time and effort put in. And even if they just give you a sandwich and a drink there to kind of compensate you, it ends up really not being worth it. The fourth con that you have to think about, and I say this very strongly, is that you playing for free could set a very dangerous precedent. In other words, if you do a free gig this time, you may be expected to do a free exposure gig next time. This word can also get passed around to other possible venues that you might want to play at. So then they'll figure, well, if they played free at this venue, then they'll play free at my venue for exposure. This can also affect the other bands and artists in your area as well. Because as a club owner or a venue manager, I can go, well, you want $200 to play my gig, but I can go over and get this other band and they'll do it for free. So you can see the conflict that you can run into with this kind of thinking. Okay, so now you've decided that you're going to do this gig for exposure. No problem. Why don't we look at some ways that you can actually capitalize on it or provide some benefits to yourself? The number one way is, why don't you get some merch? T-shirts, posters, CDs or downloads if you got them. Have a table at the gig. Make sure that you can offset some of your losses with some gains, some positive things. Another aspect of capitalizing on an exposure gig is, while you're there, get out into the crowd and network like crazy. Meet people. If you have a card or you want to trade phone numbers or emails, do it. Make sure you get as many as possible. Also, at your merch table, make sure that you have a sign-up list where people can write down their name and their email address. That way, in any future campaigns that you might have for other gigs, you've got a ton of emails that you can send your stuff out to. 3, you could treat it like a full production rehearsal. In other words, yeah, we're not getting paid for this, but you know what? Let's use the time constructively to work out any songs, any new material that you may have, even any production stuff, whether it be lighting or stage choreography. Take the time and use it wisely while you're there. Lastly, I would say, do what you can to get any kind of benefit out of this exposure gig. You know what? Even if the guy could provide maybe a little bit of gas money to you, or maybe some food and some drink. Just anything to offset the effort and the cost that you're putting into this would be helpful. I wanted to talk about a little bit of a side note on the whole exposure gig thing. And that's the topic of doing a benefit or a charity gig where you're not being paid. Generally at those types of gigs, everyone else is pitching in, and usually everyone else is also not being paid. They are all donating their time and energy for the gig, for a good cause, in order to raise money. These types of gigs are up to you. If you feel an interest or a heart for a cause, I think that that's no problem. In fact, I think that's a really awesome thing to do. Plus, at those types of gigs, you can be sure that other people who also have a heart for this will see you playing there. They'll think, hey, you know what, these guys have a pretty good heart. You know what, I do have a gig for them. In other words, I think that doing a charity gig or benefit gig could probably work in your favor a heck of a lot more than doing just a plain old exposure gig. So in closing, in my personal opinion, I don't like doing exposure gigs. You spend a lot of time learning your craft, your instrument, your performance. And by doing an exposure gig, to me, you're actually devaluing what you do. And you also stand the possibility of devaluing a lot of other artists in your area by doing that. Secondly, if you're doing an exposure gig as an opener for a headlining act, in all reality, the crowd is there to see the headliner. Generally, if I think back in my history of seeing shows, I usually don't remember who the opener was because I've actually just gone there to see the headliner. Unless you are doing an open mic or a jam night situation, venues need to be paying for entertainment. They need to be paying the bands that come in and play, that provide entertainment for their customers. It's as simple as that. You can't expect to run a business and pay for the food and the liquor that you're going to serve your patrons and not pay for the entertainment that you want to bring in. Well, thanks again for joining me on the video today. And, as I always say, I hope you got a lot out of it. If you did, give us a big thumbs up down below and smack that subscribe button as well as hitting that little bell next to it so you get notified every time we put out a new video. Also, if you have any ideas for topics that you'd like to see us talk about, or even some product reviews that you'd like to see us do, feel free to leave us a comment as well down below, and we'll get back to them as soon as we can. Once again, I'm Bruce for Blackboard Rules, and we'll see you in the next video. Come on guys, let's roll that rock'em sock'em outro!